Well, welcome back, everybody, to this not so cheery discussion on what is hell. And this is part two of the discussion. So if you missed part one, pause the video right now, go back and listen to part one. I'll provide a link in the description. In part one, we discussed ECT, Eternal Conscious Torment. And we looked at passages that people use to support that view and showed that actually a lot of them, or even all of them except for maybe one, um, aren't as strong as a support as you might have thought. So this video, we are looking at a different perspective, an alternative to ECT. And it is called annihilationism, or sometimes it's also called conditionalism. And in a few minutes, I'll get back to why it's sometimes called conditionalism. I like to call it annihilationism, and it basically means that hell just refers to death. You just cease to exist. It's ultimate destruction. So the people, you know, who God saves, they go to heaven, and everyone who decides against God, they just die and stop existing. Now, I also just want to make it clear that the people who are proponents of annihilationism, they didn't just think up this perspective to be heretical or troublemakers or something. And they also didn't just think it up because they were uncomfortable with ECT. It's not like they were just too cowardly to believe in ECT, so they came up with something that, non-Christians would find a bit more easy to accept or whatever. This is really just following the biblical evidence wherever it leads. I'll show you what I mean. So let's just compare and contrast the verses that are in support of ECT versus the verses versus the verses that are in support of annihilationism. Um, so from our last video, you'll remember there was Revelation 14, 9 to 11. And that was, as far as I can see at least, the only passage that could really potentially be used in support of ECT. And even that, like I raised in the last video, has some sort of question marks surrounding it. So then let's look at the verses in support of annihilationism. So there's 2 Peter 2:6. If he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes, he made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. So the ungodly will just be burned up into nothing, into ashes. Oh, and before I continue, remember to try to listen to these verses through just a totally neutral lens. Like, pretend like you've never heard of hell before, you've never seen anything in movies or whatever about hell. So when you think of fire and something being thrown into the fire or something being burned up, I think our natural inclination would be to just assume that the thing being thrown in the fire would just burn up into nothing, not like eternally be just burning and burning and burning alive. Okay, continuing on. Isaiah 1:28 says, "Those who forsake the Lord will perish." Perish seeming to imply ceasing to exist. Isaiah 5:24, the unrighteous will burn up like straw or dry grass when it is thrown into the fire. Psalm 1:4-6, the wicked will be like chaff that the wind blows away, and their path leads to destruction. By the way, I'm just running through these super quick. I encourage you to come back and study these passages some more, look them up for yourself. Psalm 37:2, the wicked will wither like old grass and die away. There's a lot of this imagery of grass being burned up or just dying. Daniel 2:35, the wicked will be like chaff that the wind blows away, similar to before. Moving into the New Testament, Matthew 13:40, the weeds will be pulled up and burned in the fire, the weeds being, the unrighteous, the unsaved. Matthew 7:13, the narrow gate leads to life. So following Jesus leads to life, but the wide gate leads to destruction. And again, if you knew nothing else, destruction would imply ceasing to exist. You are absolutely annihilated. 2 Peter 2:3 again talks about the destruction of the unrighteous. Same with 1 Thessalonians 5:3. It again speaks of their destruction. Romans 6:23, a really well-known passage. For the wages of sin is death. It's not hell, it's not eternal torment, it's death. 2 Timothy 1:10, Jesus came to destroy death on the cross. That is the enemy that he defeated. And to really cap it all off, John 3:16, the verse that we all know and love, Jesus, God so loved the world that he sent his son that we wouldn't perish. Again, perish seeming to imply a ceasing to exist. And so not only are there individual verses that support annihilationism, but I also just believe that it fits with sort of the broader biblical themes or broader understandings of just who God is. So for example, Psalm 103 verses 8 to 14, it just talks about the Lord is compassionate and gracious. He is slow to anger, but abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbor his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities. So, and obviously this is not just a verse, but this is a theme about God that just comes up again and again through the Old and New Testaments, that God's mercy outweighs his judgment. Here's my son coming to join our discussion on hell. He will be angry, quote unquote, for a short time, but compassionate for a much longer time. This is a theme that comes up again and again. Another broader theme, sorry, this is my son again making noise. Anyways, another broader theme that I think annihilation fits really well into is this theme of God being the source of life. Again, all through the Old and New Testaments, it paints God as, if you are following God, going towards God, you are going towards life. But if you go away from God, you are going towards death. Even in this life, we can sort of be walking in the direction of death. And so according to annihilationism, your eternal destiny will be literal death if that is what you have chosen throughout your life. And then related to that, and go see 1 Timothy 6:16 as a really sort of clear example of this. Not only is God the source of life, but he's also the only immortal being. A lot of people think that, we have immortal souls, and that if they don't go to heaven, they have to go somewhere else because they're immortal, so they go to hell. But that's not the biblical view. We actually rely on God for life, and if we are not with God, we will just cease to exist, but because we are not immortal beings. Our life is totally dependent on God keeping us alive. But as soon as he removes himself or removes us from his presence, the assumption is that we would die because we are not immortal beings. And so the question I want to leave you with is just why would we believe in ECT, eternal conscious torment? You know, if that's what you do believe, and I mean this as a sincere question. I don't mean it in any sort of, you know, as like a put down or anything, but just truly like reflect, why do you believe in ECT? And I think if we were like, if we had never heard of hell or seen any movies or TV shows or books that talked about this sort of ECT perspective on hell, and we just read the Bible starting from scratch, I think we would just naturally go in the direction of annihilationism. I wonder if the reason that some people cling so tightly to the ECT perspective is it's just number one, it's what we've grown up with in many cases, like it's just all we've ever known, and so to think of a different perspective just seems kind of crazy at first. But then number two, like I alluded to earlier, it's just so pervasive. Like just anytime we've thought about hell and anytime we've heard it in the media or in sermons or whatever, it's just always come from this ECT perspective, even from non-Christian circles, even non-Christians, because of how popular this view has become. Even non-Christians would think of ECT when they think of hell. So I just think if all that wasn't the case and we came at it neutrally, I wonder, would we still believe in ECT, or would we believe in annihilationism? And if there is at least as much evidence, if not more evidence for annihilationism, isn't that also just like the one we would prefer to believe? Like, if the evidence points in that direction, plus it's just the more palatable, or like the more comforting perspective, you know, why not believe it? So I'll just leave you with that question to reflect on.